أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen.
Amen.
And loose translation: I seek refuge with Allah from Satan, the rejected enemy, with Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. The praise is for Allah, Lord of all the systems of knowledge, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, master of the day of judgment. Thee alone do we worship, and thee alone do we seek assistance. Show us, guide us upon the straight path, the path upon those whom you have bestowed your favors, not like those who have earned your wrath, and not like those who have gone astray. Ameen. Allah surely has spoken the truth.
Ameen, ameen, ameen. Thank you, Imam Mateen. And if you could be prepared to close us out at the end of the program, I would appreciate that. We would appreciate that. So welcome back to Study Al-Islam. I am your sister and friend, Fitrah Muhammad. We're going to get right on to it because I'm sticking to a format that will keep us on time, inshallah. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Jamillah Karim. Her bio is in the Study Al-Islam newsletter that was emailed this Saturday for everyone to read. And just so you know, going forward, every speaker's bio will be in the newsletter the day before they speak, so that you can be familiar with who is speaking with you, what they're and what they will be sharing. Welcome, Dr. Jamillah, and we are ready for your presentation. If you would take yourself off of mute, you can begin.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Sister Fitrah, for inviting me to study Islam. It is indeed an honor. And thank all of you who have joined us. May Allah bless this gathering. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad.
Dr. Jamillah, I just have to say, Dr. Jamillah, I just have to say how beautiful you look.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you.
And everyone knows that Dr. Jamillah is a part of our community. You know, these things are in her bio, but I'm just so proud to see how beautiful she looks. Please continue, Dr. Jamillah.
Okay. So thank you for my talk on my return home to a spiritual center in West Africa. In December 2020, during the pandemic, we packed up our house in Atlanta, where I had homeschooled my 3 sons, to move to Medina Bay, Senegal in West Africa. 5 months prior, my best friend asked me if I would move with her to Senegal so that our sons could attend Quran school there. My best friend Joy decided that memorizing the speech of Allah would be more worthwhile for her 8-year-old son than the alternative picked up in popular songs. I'll admit I was not as determined that my 3 sons memorized the Quran, but once presented with the idea, I wanted a year in Senegal badly. I convinced my husband to agree to my 3 sons and I living there for all of 2021. He would visit every other month, including on our anniversary, where Joy gifted us with a photo shoot, which is the current slide. Fascinatingly, from my lens, I see the Senegambia as the West African region most on the radar, not only for Black American Muslims, but American Muslims in general. And this has to do with some recent developments in the American Muslim landscape, mainly through online influencers or social media. Angelica. Angelica Lindsay Ali, also known as the Village Auntie, has shared many times on her platform and elsewhere excellent scholarship on West African women scholars, including Nana Asma'u and Sheikha Mariam Niass. Also on her vast platform, she regularly speaks about the blessing of having her sheikh in her life, Sheikh Mahi Cisse of Medina Bay. Dr. Bilal Ware, who will also present later in the year on this series, author of The Walking Quran and curator of Invisible Muslims. Dr. Ware waxes poetically on the tradition of authentic scholarship and exemplary piety in West Africa, featuring Senegalese scholars Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba and Sheikh Ibrahim Niass, who I will talk about more later. Dr. Ware also uses his platform to recognize the amazing guidance and scholarship of Imam Fodé Dram, who's also Senegalese or Gambian, and a major influencer in his own right, and also a sheikh to other well-known African-American Muslim leaders and speakers. Ustad Ruqayya Yaqub, educator and founder of Heartwork, she recently published a wonderful and important children's book, The Gift of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. And again, Ahmadou Bamba is a scholar of Touba, Senegal. And also her husband, Sheikh Mohammed Menzies, will join us in the series later, also another major influencer. The popularity of these leaders has taken off exponentially in the last 5 years. However, the sheikh to first put Senegal on the map for African Americans is the legendary Sheikh Hassan Cisse of Medina Bay, almost 50 years ago. He first came to New York City in 1976, a critical time in the history of Islam in America, as this was during the precious and critical moment or period that Imam Warthi Muhammad was continuing his community's transition from the Nation of Islam to Al-Islam. I'm going to talk about Sheikh Hassan a little bit more later, but to give you an idea of what he means to many African-American Muslims of your generation is that his students possess a reverence and love for him, akin to how many of you feel about Imam Warthi Muhammad, may Allah have mercy on him, for bringing you from the darkness into the light through the Holy Quran and the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So speaking of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I want to formally define 2 words that are important to understanding Islamic spirituality in West Africa in general, and Medina Bay in particular, and why someone like me would want to live there for a year or longer and call it home. The first term, and you're very familiar with it, is sheikh. And I define sheikh as both a spiritual guide and a scholar of the Islamic sciences, including the Quran. A sheikh is an inheritor of the Prophet Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him, meaning that the sheikh is a living example of the Prophet ﷺ in character and purity of heart. The majority of Muslims in the United States do not have a sheikh. Almost everyone in Senegal does. When one takes a sheikh, she identifies with a path popularly called a tariqa in Arabic. And so tariqa means a path. The most popular ones in Senegal are the Mouridiyya, the Qadariyya, and the Tijaniyya. Most tariqas are named after a great sheikh who lived before the 19th century. As a living example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the sheikh is a guide to a community of believers who find in the sheikh or sheikha a strong personal connection and divine direction, very similar to the way we love and follow and identify with Imam Warthi Muhammad. Speaking of love, this is the virtue that most embodies the purpose and passion of tariqas. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Say, O Prophet, if you really love Allah, then follow me, and Allah shall love you and forgive you your sins. Allah is most forgiving, very merciful." The Prophet is Habibullah, the beloved of Allah, and as he is the creation most beloved to Allah, he ﷺ is also the creation who every Muslim strives to be most beloved to him or herself. As taught in the Hadith, none of you will have complete faith till he loves me more than his father, his children, and all mankind. How do we reach this level of complete faith? The sheikh or sheikha specializes in this aspect of faith, loving the Prophet ﷺ with a high and intense love. And the Sheikh guides his or her students on the path of love. Throughout the world, a primary way that this faith-completing love of the Prophet ﷺ is instilled is through poetry and song. And we are familiar with this even within our Black American Muslim culture. So, for instance, I'm going to go to YouTube.
Yeah. People saying stuff about my prophet. They see our numbers rise, and so they make him a target. Agitate the Muslims, get money in their pocket. We just work to spread the truth and make sure people got it. Like how we treated neighbors with all the loving care. Examples that
Okay. I'm having some technical difficulties with the video. So I'm gonna just go back to the PowerPoint. I think you might know the song, and that you can always go back to it. Native Dean's A Mercy to Mankind.
Mambo yalikuwa bora.
Okay.
Miaka mingi aliweza kupigana na njaa na watoto wachache.
In that video, they sing the chorus to the Burda, which translates, Mawlaya salli wa sallim da'iman abadan ala habibika khairul khalqi kullihimi, which translates as, my Lord, send boundless prayers and blessings upon your beloved, the best of mankind, always and forever. And the Burda is the most recited prophetic praise poetry around the world, and it was composed in the 13th century by Imam al-Busiri, who was of Berber, North and West African descent. Medina Bay is the spiritual center that I call home, and it is known for its praise poetry, presented in song form called a qasida. Okay. I'm gonna try and share another time. I'll just go to this video of it gives you a view of Medina Bay, the city, and there's a qasida or song with translation being played, a song, praise poetry of the Prophet.
الله 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 والدعاء المستجاب الله وهو المصطفى الله كان شراب الله الله الله
A land that does not have in it the love of Taha is a wasteland. And Taha is one of the names of the Prophet. I said them, it's the name of a chapter in the Quran. It's one of his names. Okay. Let me exit out of that. Let me see if I could quickly show another example of praise poetry of the Prophet here in Ghana. Midge. Hmm. So there, that was poetry praising the Prophet ﷺ. So how we give salawat on the Prophet, singing that, and lines of poetry praising him. And in that scene in Ghana, you see that it is performed in a very festive way. And the lyrics or the lines of that poetry is by Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas, who is the founder of Medina Bay. And that's a photo of him. Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas's city is the most active center of the Tariqa Tijaniya in the world, and it is named after its founder, Sheikh Ahmed Tijani, born in Algeria, North Africa in 1737. Sheikh Ibrahim's distinction as the most renowned sheikh of the global Tijani Sufi order and the most influential spiritual guide of West Africa is greatly attributed to his passionate poetry praising the Prophet ﷺ. But not just among Tijanis is this small town of less than 100K residents a global force. Every year, the Imam or chief spiritual leader of Medina Bay, Imam Sheikh Ahmed Tijani Sise, makes the list of top 25 influential Muslims. Imam Sheikh and Imam Sheikh Mahi Sise, in this photo, are both grandsons of Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas and have followers called Murids in Arabic, hailing from every country in West Africa, from as far east as Singapore and Japan, and as far west as the United States. In this photo of a Murid of Sheikh Mahi who lives in Montana, mentioned earlier, Sheikh Mahi also is a spiritual guide of Angelica Lindsay Ali. Usually when we hear the word Medina, it refers to Medina, Saudi Arabia. And here, you know, this is a picture of the Prophet's mosque there, and Medina simply means a city in Arabic. To distinguish the Prophet Muhammad's city, it is called Medina Munawwara. And the city in Senegal, it is Medina Bay. It means the city of our father, referring to Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas. It was the embodiment of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the Sheikhs of Medina Bay that led American women like myself to turn to this global center in the first place. And this was in 1976. At this time, there were Tijanis in America, but only ones from West Africa. An immigrant from Ghana living in New York City invited one of Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas's grandsons to visit America. His name was Sheikh Hassan Sise. And as I mentioned earlier in showing his photo, he is a legend among Tijanis. When the late Sheikh Hassan Sise is described by Tijani Murids, they describe him with a level of respect and love, but also intimacy that parallels the way Muslims in general talk about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. One of the most famous descriptions of the Prophet ends with, "Whoever saw him fell in love with him." Similarly, an American described her first time meeting Sheikh Hassan with these words, "We were giggling and looking at Sheikh, and then he turned to greet us, and we just instantly fell in love with him. You immediately felt compassion and kindness for him. We had never met a Sheikh that felt like he was a friend." The first American home Sheikh Hassan visited was that of a woman by the name of Karim. She had converted to Islam 6 years prior. When she met Sheikh Hassan, she couldn't help but stare. She said, "I never saw the light in someone like I saw in you." She would later tell him when explaining the reason she couldn't take her eyes off of him during their first encounter, or those are the words that she stated to him. Sister Karima truly became one of Sheikh Hassan's best friends. After bonding with him in the United States, she traveled to Medina Bay. It was in the holy month of Ramadan, known to non-Muslims as the month of fasting. However, to Muslims, it is equally known as the month of the Quran. Sister Karima delighted in how the recitation of the Quran filled the air, both from the mosque loudspeakers and the people themselves, particularly the children, the majority of whom attended Quran school in their early years. Here are her words. I was impressed with the kids. All they were doing was studying the Quran. All that they were thinking about was Allah. La ilaha illallah. That was all I was hearing from the kids over there. And I thought I would really like that for Amina, her daughter. Amina was 10 years old at the time. And similar to my best friend Joy, Sister Karima was concerned about the music her daughter was becoming exposed to at social gatherings. In contrast, the children of Medina Bay naturally picked up songs of remembrance of God. Sister Karima said, all she heard from the kids was La ilaha illallah. Nothing is worthy of worship except Allah, the universal Muslim expression of praise, sung often as the chorus of songs praising the Prophet through Sheikh Ibrahim's poetry. Wanting her daughter to know Allah's speech by heart, Sister Karima came up with the idea to start a Quran school in Medina Bay for American children, where she would be the headmistress. Sheikh Hassan agreed, and for a decade, she managed the house where her daughter and other American students lived while memorizing the Quran and learning the local language Wolof. She ensured that meals were provided, that laundry was done, that 6 children were cared for. At one point, there were 33 children living in the house under Sister Karima's tender care. After her daughter memorized the Quran, Sister Karima returned to the US, but left behind a legacy that continues to this day. Hundreds of youth have come back and have gone through the school. It is now called the African American Islamic Institute, and it's where my sons attended Quran school when we were in Medina Bay. Sister Karima is now 87 years old, and she visits Medina Bay every year during Ramadan. My friend Joy also took this photo of us in Ramadan when we lived there, and she titled it A Passing Down of Legacy. Like the village auntie, I took the Tariqa with Sheikh Mahi in 2016, but prior to doing so, I was a professor at Spelman College from 2004 to 2011. And I also published my first book, which was my dissertation research, American Muslim Women. And some of you I know familiar with the book. I look at relations between African American and immigrant Muslims. And one important aspect of the book is gender and how gender norms in our communities impact the way that we interact with each other, whether we attend each other's mosque or not. So following in the legacy of Sister Karima, I have been blessed to use my experience in Medina Bay through my scholarship. And so I want to end with words that I share on many occasions to academic audiences, where I talk about the connection between Medina Bay, Senegal, and my own scholarship. And in this scholarly analysis, I demonstrate my love for Medina Bay and how that love is based on my foundation. I'm raised in the Warthi Muhammad community in Atlanta, Georgia. So this slide is one of congregational prayer in the courtyard. So outside the mosque, the overflow in the courtyard. And as I've described to scholarly communities, I'll just summarize here. So these are mostly, academic communities of non-Muslims. But I talk about, the way that we are generally separated because of the touching of bodies in the salat. And ultimately, women prefer not to bow and prostrate in front of men. And I talk about, however, so even though we all, Black women and immigrant Muslim women, we embrace the piety and the privacy that gender boundaries allow for us. There's a difference in the way that Black women have carved out our own cultural expression of how we navigate those gender boundaries. So there are extreme cases of gender boundaries, as we know, where the mosque is not even considered a place for women. And we know that this is the case in some of the countries that American immigrant women have come from. However, the mosque in America is a place for women, yet there are the gender boundaries, such as the walls of partition separating men and women in many immigrant mosques. And so I quote an African-American Muslim woman from our community to give an idea of, our general position on these kinds of boundaries like the gender wall. She said, I don't go to mosque where they got these rags dividing the men from the women. How dare an African-American imam divide his woman from a man by putting a partition or rag up? I don't dare go to a mosque where I got to sit behind a rag like I'm some inferior being. And here I have come through slavery. I've come across the Atlantic with you on the slave ship, picked cotton with you in the field, saved you from master's whipping and hanging you, and you're going to put me behind a rag because a foreigner comes across the water and tells you that's the setup? Oh no, not me. I ain't having it. Initially, the mosque in Medina Bay, built in the 1930s, did not have a barrier between the men and women. However, it was put up in 2008 for political reasons, not cultural. Culturally, men and women are comfortable with soft, fluid gender arrangements, more fluid than anything I've ever seen in the US. And this is demonstrated in the mosque courtyard, where worshipers can hear everything that goes on inside the masjid through the loudspeakers. On one side of the courtyard, women always stand at the front. In other areas outside, women sit behind the men, but their space seems to softly flow into the men. And here's an example of what I mean. So there's a woman and then two boys and then a man with glasses and a mask, all in the same row. In the tombs, and so they on the mosque courtyard, they actually have a mausoleum or the tombs of Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas and other awliya, friends of Allah, scholar saints that have passed from Medina, who live in Medina Bay, and often the family of Sheikh Ibrahim. And in fact, Sheikh Hassan Sisay's tomb is there. So in the tombs where space is tighter, we find even more intimacy between men and women. I sit in a space outside the masjid that is dominated by men. Men usually sit alongside the wall, but not shown in this photo. Many nights, I have been the only woman in this space. I'm speaking as though I'm there. May Allah take me back there soon. From this spot, you can see into the mosque door, an area where the muezzin calls to prayer and the imam leads the prayer. I wrote that I realized I have become the African-American woman that I described 20 years ago in my first book. Women who thoughtfully and effectively carved a space out for themselves in male-dominated mosque spaces. In my book, I quote a woman named Zakiya, who on occasion visits an immigrant mosque where the women pray separately on the lower level. She said, it's not Islam to put the sisters in the basement. That's not Islam. When I first moved here in '94, I was too scared to go on the other side where they're serving food, where the brothers were. But now after Juma, I walk right over there. Like Zakiya, initially, I did not go into this space because I did not see women there, but finally found a way and a place there. The men have warmly welcomed me, and women occasionally join me. Here are pictures taken during Medina Bay's largest spiritual gathering, the Mawlid, celebrating the birth of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And the city swells with pilgrims from all over West Africa and the world. During Mawlid season, there are long lines to get into the tombs. Let me go back. So here are the long lines to get in. And here we see there's an attempt. They do separate the men and the women through the lines. But once again, inside the tombs, this becomes impossible. In the beginning of Mawlid season, women take over the space that I normally sit by myself, especially women pilgrims from Mauritania. And you can see the one with their wrapping. The Mauritanian women wear a distinct wrapping like the woman in the pink and lavender. However, as more guests arrive, even the men spill out into this space. And again, notice the soft gender boundaries. As more guests arrive, men, they do take over the space, but women still find their place. And in the larger talk that I give to academic communities, I began talking about how men, and particularly young men, dominate the mosque space in Medina Bay. And I talk about from a feminist or pro-woman perspective, ironically, how I find that very liberating. So this is again, and as we know, in most of our mosque spaces, even in the Warthi Muhammad community, because of the religious obligation for men, the men dominate. So here we see that happening, the men taking over the space. But again, women are there. Here, a woman joins a men's dhikr or prayer circle form within the larger crowds. And I sit right next to this circle taking the photo. And here's the same woman at a different angle, and note that she is sitting exactly where I sat when I was the only woman. And behind these three women lies a whole section of women. Okay. Oh, yeah. And this picture, I sort of debated whether I would share it or not. It sometimes provokes a little bit of controversy when I share it. But you see how the space has become so tight that you have a woman who's sitting right next to a man. But what this brings me back, or takes me back to, is actually the Hajj, and how, as many of you know, just the overflow of bodies makes it really hard to kind of control that. And finally, in this picture, I'm sitting in the mihrab, or the prayer niche that lies at the very front of the mosque. And it is where the imam stands to lead the prayer. And next to me is a woman who traveled from the Gambia to attend the Mawlid. Her name is Yamalin, and she's a gifted writer and a spiritual seeker, and a murid of Sheikh Mahi. And all the murids of Sheikh Mahi are also the murids of Sheikh Ibrahim, the founder of the city. And one of our nights in the mosque courtyard, she so astutely noted, if there is space, I will take the space. If there is space, I will take the space. If there is not, I will make space for myself. So I end there. I think we have a couple of more minutes. I may try to show one more of the videos that I was trying to show earlier. And it's actually right in this space.
Dr. Karim, I do want to give the audience an opportunity to ask you a couple of questions as well.
Absolutely.
But if you want to show the video, certainly, please.
It's very short.
Sure, no problem.
Let me try to, okay. All right, it's this one here. So here I'm sitting in that space, and where again, I can see where the muezzin calls the adhan and where the imam leads, but also after Maghrib prayer, every night, there's a dhikr, a group dhikr, and then there is a men sing the qasidas of Sheikh Ibrahim. And one thing that gravitated me to that space was that I could actually witness the singers and record a video. And also you'll notice a man who is massaging the foot of another man. This another thing that was very impressive about Medina Bay. Many people I call it the city of lovers and the city of love, and the way that love is expressed in a way that goes beyond our kind of dominant romantic love between a man and a woman. But of course, this highest love, this love for the Prophet ﷺ. And that is manifested in so many ways, including this brotherly love. So you'll just hear someone singing the qasida again, praising the Prophet ﷺ, and you'll hear, the salawat in the singing, and you'll see this man massaging. And we'll just end with that. Okay, that's it. So I'll stop sharing.
If what I can offer, Dr. Jamillah, is for 1 week, we put your presentation in the newsletter. If you send me the videos, we can also place them in the newsletter for the list for the participants to hear. I want to say to the community, we are going to take a few questions if you have any, but I want to first commend and express a great respect for you and HUD, your husband, for finding the ability to work together for you to pursue your passion. Being a mother of 3 and not living that traditional marriage of, that the woman has to be in the house and she's got to be there cooking and cleaning and doing the laundry. And I'm not saying anything against that, but not everybody is built for cooking and cleaning and doing the laundry every day. And I just want to say, please, I just want to tell you how inspirational you are, coming from our community and being able to pursue your passion, the gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you. It's obvious you have a gift. So I do want the first question to be to you is, as a Muslim African American coming from our community, what was the distinct advantage and difference learning Islam in Africa?
First, I want to again just mention the similarities, and because the Wardi Muhammad community and the women, particularly in that community, like my mother, may Allah have mercy on her, who always showed their love and pride in us and encouraged us so that we could become scholars and who could travel the world with our families. And so I brought that into Senegal. So I want to say that first. But I would say the Quran. I would say the Quran, and I talked about that. And but again, as we know, that was what Imam Wardi Muhammad emphasized. I often tell the story of how he had us reading a juz every day in the month of Ramadan, so we completed, and we actually thought that was an obligation until later we found out it was not. But in Medina, the Quran is played on loudspeakers in Ramadan, all throughout the day. And then, I would say this praise poetry, this deep, passionate love for the Prophet ﷺ is really what is distinct. And of course, as we know, especially in those early years, we were developing community. Even in the 1980s, I remember, we didn't have prayer established in our masjid, at least not in Atlanta, all the prayers established. And now we do. We've come a long way. But in a lot of ways, we still are learning and developing. So I would say that kind of high love and broad and expansive love is what stands out.
Wonderful. If we have any questions from the listening audience, please raise your hand and Marsha will take you off of mute. Do we have any questions for Dr. Jamillah? She's from our community. We love her. She has gone on to study her What is your doctorate in, Dr. Jamillah?
It is in religion and Islamic studies in particular, and Islam in America is my research.
And for anyone in the community that would like to invite you to speak, how can you put in the chat or let the community know how they can reach you?
Okay.
And I see we have a hand raised, Masha. We can take that person off of mute so they can ask their question. Dr. Brian Morrison, I see he has his hand raised. Please make your questions short, and Dr.
This is Amatullah. I think the sister Marsha told me to unmute.
Assalamu alaikum.
Dr. Jamillah, thank you.
Can you hear me?
And the question that I have is, your son, you went for your sons to learn there in that African American Institute. Are there a lot of young girls who go, and if so, have they become Hafiz?
Yes, and thank you for raising that question. The memorization of the Quran, Hifz Quran. That's what I wanted to specify in answering the first question, that when I said the Quran, it's that memorization of the Quran. And indeed, yes, there are women. The second. Okay, so the first student from America I mentioned in the narrative is a woman named Amina, and her mother, co-founded the school. So she was the second to complete, and people followed her. And so the first to complete was a young man named Ahmed Mohammed. After him, she completed, and then one just completed. I'm glad you said that. At least 5 have completed, but recently, the daughter of Itzhak Majid and Corey Majid, they a daughter of theirs completed just at the end of Ramadan, and they come from our community or affiliated with our community. Itzhak is from Atlanta, Georgia. We went to Wardi Muhammad High School together. So yes, it's very much open to men and women, boys and girls. And yes,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
It's interesting that we have quite a few young people who are now Hafiz of the Quran in our community, whose grandparents, I know two now, Sister Beatrice, whose grandparents were in the Nation of Islam. She has a 15 and a 16-year-old grandchild, a grandson and daughter who are both Hafiz of the community. Who's the next question?
Hello,
Yes.
can you guys hear me?
Yes, Dr. Morrison, please ask your question.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for this presentation. It's extremely important and very valuable for the community. In my own research, I did some writing on the Moorish Science Temple of America and women's roles. And one of the things that I found was that Black women were very pivotal, both in that organization as well as in Black churches, and as well as your example is, Sister Fitrah, here in our community, of taking on roles of leadership and really being the backbone of our institutions. Do you find something similar to that? What are the roles of women other than just worshipers in your experience in West Africa? That's my question.
Excellent question.
Yes, yeah, women, very similar to our experience here, but also different, but very similar. Women play a very critical role. I mentioned Angelica Lindsay Ali sharing on the women scholars of Senegal often highlights Sheikh Mariam Niass, who's the daughter of Sheikh Ibrahim, and he has several daughters who are scholars, certainly Hafiz of Quran, like being Hafiz of Quran. I mean, that's just like drinking water there. So of course the women, they have done that and advance in other studies, including Arabic. That's another thing, is that there are many Senegalese, and particularly Medina Bay, who are fluent in the Fusha, in the Arabic, in the classical Arabic. And so yes, women are certainly trained that way, definitely in the scholarly homes, but even beyond. And but I would say that's where it does get a little bit trickier, because outside of the scholarly families and in the masses, you do find a lot of some of the traditional roles and expectations for women, caring for the homes. I mean, that does exist there, like in many places around the world. So that's where I say there's a little bit of a difference there. But again, the girls, they do go to school. And so a book you can check out is Wrapped in Authority by Joseph Hill, I believe is the author, Wrapped in Authority. And there he highlights women muqaddimas and sheikhas within particularly the Tijani community in Medina Bay, but also in Dakar. And he talks about, the way they infuse spirituality within, these traditional women's roles, like being a mother, but also, beyond, and even as Imam Wardi Muhammad talks about, and I talk about in my second book, Women of the Nation, he talks about mother leadership, I think he calls it, a women mother leadership. is how I'm remembering at the moment. But he talks about that we take our unique qualities as women, and particularly as potential mothers, and how we lead in a certain way with that. And so I think, you'll find the same with Tijani women. And I mentioned the word muqaddama. So a muqaddama is a representative of the sheikh, muqaddam or muqaddama. And in Senegal and even here in the United States, especially in the United States, women who are muqaddamas, Sheikh Hassan made them muqaddamas. And so they represent him, they bring people to the tariqah, they educate. So that is pervasive.
I mean, it's obvious that the woman has a particular place, gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a surah in the Quran about the pleading woman. The Prophet, peace be upon him, told us that if there was anyone to bow to, it's the woman. Who do you respect first? The woman. Who should you show kindness to? The woman. So we know that women have a special place, that Allah created the woman. Imam Muhammad talked about us being the nurturers of minds. So we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding us and inspiring us. And what's so beautiful about the images that you showed, that is a distinct difference between here and the Middle East, which is where I lived for a year, is that the women wear such beautiful colors of self-expression. And that's just, even looking at them make you happy. It gives you a different image of Islam, freedom. You want to speak to that, because the colors are beautiful.
Well, that's another major component of this larger scholarly talk that I give, and it's what endears me to Medina Bay. And again, it's something that I think comes also from our community, and particularly in Atlanta, Georgia, where we're known for our dress and the fashion shows. It's the mirror. So yeah, so I just want to thumbs up that. I know we have another question.
Yeah, please, another question. So when are you planning a trip for us to go to Senegal?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
This is Joy Faisal Salim.
You're breaking
Driving,
up.
but I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm so happy to be. Can you hear me? Okay, hold on one moment. Let me take something.
Wait,
One
sister.
second.
Wait. As a mother, you cannot drive and talk on the phone. We just will not accept that. You have to pull over and ask your question. I'm sorry. We will not.
Okay, I will.
Yes.
No problem.
Pull over,
No
sister.
problem.
Pull over.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Okay, that's my friend Joy that I mentioned in the talk. And she's actually on her way to take her son. Our sons, they started in Medina Bay. We brought them back, and they're continuing his school. My son's here in Dallas. I moved to Dallas, and her son in Memphis, Imam Hamza, started a school there, and he's training them to be scholars. And she's on her way to take her son there, and he's going to Morocco for the month of May to continue his study. So Allah's really opened the door. It's wide open for us.
Wow. So have you pulled over, sister? She's got to pull over. We're not going to accept her. Is there another question? And once she pulls over, we will accept her question.
I can read some of the ones someone mentioned that rapping clarity is a great.
We have about 4 more minutes. Go ahead.
I haven't been to someone asked about Benin, how it compares to Senegal. I haven't been there, but you definitely find a similar West African, ethos across these spaces, and ones of intense spirituality. The tariqas that are very much a part of West African spirituality throughout, not just in Senegal. In fact, the greatest number of students of Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse are in Nigeria. And that's what makes the current Imam of Medina Bay among the top 25 influential leaders. He has like this massive following in Nigeria, which has, just a huge Muslim population. Someone asked, I have not been to Tuba, so I can't describe the atmosphere there. But I hear that it's wonderful, and it's, like Medina Bay. Can you explain how the high focus on spirituality can assist us with establishing ourselves materially in America? I think that's an excellent question. I really think that has to do with our sincerity and our purity of heart. We do things for Allah. too often, I mean, even with the Nation of Islam, that's why Imam Warthi Muhammad shut a lot of things down. A lot of people are like, well, why can't we still maintain the businesses that we had back then? But there was, there was some corruption and some coercion in that. And were we really doing that for Allah? And that's another beautiful thing that Imam Warthi Muhammad did. He said, do this for Allah, and also find your gifts. Find the gifts that Allah has given you, and you can use that in direct ways in the community. It's not just one way to contribute to your community. So, and I think that relates to how we can establish ourselves materially, is that we are really in touch with what Allah wants for us and the talents and skills that He's given us, and how we can then contribute to the community. But again, like sincerity is so important. Correlates to the teachings we received in the nation under the guidance of Imam Warthi Muhammad Quran. So I must be one to say Imam Warthi was very instrumental. Okay, so these just comments. Alhamdulillah. Can you speak to the nature of interfaith activities in West Africa? So Senegal is like 99% Muslim, but you definitely have places like Nigeria and Ghana, which large Christian populations. I became friends with a brother from Cameroon when I was there. They have a large Christian population. Honestly, though, I'm not an expert in that area. Okay, Joy is ready to speak.
Okay, Joy, let's get Joy's question and see her.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for that. Yes, I'm safe and I'm stopped. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much for that.
Of course.
And thank you for this space. It's my first time being in this gathering, so I'm looking forward to attending all of the other ones as well. So my question for Dr. Jamillah, because she grew up in the Imam Muhammad community. I converted to Islam in college, and I've had the pleasure of enjoying the community. My husband, he grew up in the community, and alhamdulillah, it's been so beautiful. And so my question is probably threefold. The first part of the question is, how do you think that the Imam Muhammad community can enrich the Senegalese community? How could the Senegalese community enrich the Imam Muhammad community? And what do you think is the bridge that connects the two?
Okay, excellent question. And it's something that that Sheikh Mahi and the other Sheikh Hassan really encourage. I think that this deep study of the faith and making it, relevant to our lives, so that relates to that material establishment, right? So one, not just speaking specifically about Senegal, but it includes Senegalese, but even here in America, a lot of people, they read Quran, but they don't know the meaning of the Quran, right? So I've always seen that as like an advantage of the Warthi Muhammad community, like a quality, an advanced quality that we have that others could benefit from. And so that's what I mean by deep study, but it's also is what happens when you are in a largely like convert, community or in a country where Islam is new. Even for immigrant Muslims to this country, there's like a revival of Islam and the study of Islam for themselves. In Pakistan, they just absorbed it from the culture. Here, women, they started going to the masjid for the first time because it was the place to learn about their faith and have this space for their children to socialize and learn about their faith. So that's what African Americans, and particularly the Warthi Muhammad community really bring to a lot of like traditional generational Muslims, including Senegal, and especially highlighting Warthi Muhammad community because Imam Muhammad was very, very intentional about us making Islam relevant and for us, right? And so obviously, in a place like Senegal, Islam, it naturally like kind of evolves very relevant to the people. But what I would again add is that kind of that kind of deeper study. So there's this love for the shuyukh, again, they're the representatives of the Prophet ﷺ, and you see the way that they adore their sheikhs, and that's really very beautiful. I think we have that in the Warthi Muhammad community. But I think though sometimes what happens there is that there's not really attention to what are our teachers actually teaching us, right? What are the books, that they're studying from, how can we, really learn our faith? But that said, as I also just said, so I don't want to downplay like the great spiritual, the scholarly tradition in West Africa, right? But I think what, again, and maybe what America has to offer is the way that that's kind of like, like trickles down to like everybody, right? In a sense. So I think that's one area. And again, the way that we, America in general, can help people in Africa and Asia is just like with the economic development, definitely. And I know that Imam Muhammad, he had, and some of his community members had made inroads there, and we can continue to do that in establishing businesses and in Senegal, your husband, I put a shout out to, her husband is actually building a hotel there. And so that here's an example of how we can work together. People come and visit Medina Bay. They can go and stay at his hotel, but he's bringing jobs to the communities there. So I would say that's another major way that we can give to these communities and help build and connect with these communities.
We're going to have to close out, but one of the things that I do want to share also, which is being a member of this community, we had to find our way in America. And Imam Muhammad was very strong on us being independent thinkers in the translation of the Quran, even in the language that was used, and specifically for our experience. So making sure that we were not colonized was extremely important to both leaderships under the Nation of Islam and then transitioning under Imam Muhammad's leadership. And so when you're from a country like Senegal, where everybody looks alike and the cultures don't conflict with each other, us here in America, learning Islam, being converts or reverts, whatever label you want to put on us, the Nation of Islam and Imam Muhammad kept us on a pathway to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a pure way. And I think what you said was most important, because Imam Muhammad used to say, the sincere heart Allah will guide. Allah guides the sincere heart. With that, we're going to have to close out. I just want to say to you, Dr. Jamillah, you are always welcome to come back and share your experiences with us. We hope that you will plan a trip to Senegal and invite us, inshallah, so that we know that somebody on the ground is taking care of things for us, because going to Africa can be a shock.
There is a current trip that's taking place. I didn't have time to look for it, but I'll
send it to me and I will put it in the newsletter.
Okay, for this summer.
Yeah, I just want to close out with two very short announcements. First, I want everybody to welcome Marsha Nivens, who is now assisting Study Al-Islam in the technical support that we so desperately need. And so I want to I want everyone to really welcome Marsha, and I want to just tell her how thankful and appreciative I am. She will be with us every week, inshallah, to make sure that we keep things running smooth while Naima is preparing to release her first album, inshallah. And then the next announcement I want to make, which is extremely important, next week, we have a very special guest. And under normal conditions, we would call this, in the first resurrection, we would call this a holdback meeting. After the program ends at 11 o'clock, we're going to have a holdback meeting with Dr. Jamillah Duke, Dr. Jamillah Muhammad Duke. She is the director of the School of Research Science in U.S. High School in Dubai. If you've dreamt of working abroad, this may be your opportunity. She will present a PowerPoint information about the school and the opportunity to work and live in Dubai. So if you or someone you know, a teacher, an administrator, or someone who can serve as a board member, you don't want to miss this presentation. Now, let me just say to you, and I'm going to close, who Dr. Jamillah Muhammad Duke is. She is the daughter of Ayman Muhammad. May he be forgiven his sins and be in the highest place in paradise, which is the oldest son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. She is the niece of Imam Muhammad. May he be in the highest place in paradise. So this is one of our babies who has now has her doctorate in education, and she is the director of a school, a beautiful school in Dubai, and she is interviewing and recruiting. So this is a great opportunity, and she will do an extensive presentation at 11 o'clock next Sunday. So invite anybody who's a teacher, administrator, science, math, whatever, who may want to take advantage of this opportunity. With that said, I'm going to ask the Imam to close us out in prayer and see you next week, inshallah. Brother Imam.
I just want to say thank you, Sister Fitrah, for this platform of education for our community, and to Dr. Jamillah for opening the mental eye of West Africa for us. I did spend a few months in the Gambia, and so I got some of that flavor. With that being said, we'll close. Rabbana atina miladunka rahmatan wa hayyi lana min amrina rashada. Our Lord, grant us from yourself mercy and facilitate for us from our affairs in the right way. Ameen.
Ameen. Thank you, and see you next week. Please share the flyer with everyone so we can get our community back on track with Study Al-Islam. Until next week, Assalamu alaikum. Be safe.